This is RackAddicts After Hours.
Hello everyone, welcome back to RackAddicts After Hours. We've hit episode 10, the big old 1-0, so thank you very much for tuning in. We're in our favourite pub, as always, after work, and we've got some vaguely musical stuff to chat about, and I think Pete's going to open us up. We've got Pete, we've got Andy, we've got Telmo, we've got, off the mic, we've got Tom, Nada and Guy around as well. So Pete, where are we starting this week?
Okay, I wanted to talk about a subject that's become very, unfortunately, dear to my heart in the last week, and that's hearing loss, but in the context of being either a musician or a producer, which has a different kind of contextual than it would do potentially in a normal situation. So I was going to start with a bit of an anecdote, which is basically what I did last week, and it'll all become clear why. So as you may recall, we did our podcast last week, and then I went straight to London to do a photo shoot at a nightclub for one of my colleagues. A fantastic nightclub called the Steel Yard.
Yeah, you said that was under one of those big old kind of train arch type situations.
Yes, it's under the one, I can't remember quite which station it is. It's on the South Bank. It's kind of just sort of opposite the Shard.
Nice.
And it's quite I think it's quite a newish club. I think certainly it looks like it's had a refit recently. Top level PA, phenomenal lights and lasers, really quite an impressive place.
How many people roughly were in there?
Well, on Saturday it was in excess of 1,000.
Wow. Yeah.
So quite a reasonably large club.
One, yeah.
So, as I said earlier, they've got a really substantial PA. It almost looked like the sort of thing you'd expect to see at an outdoor festival almost. I mean, it was a monster. And it was just so loud. Now, I'm always been very protective about my hearing. I wear hearing protection. I was wearing hearing protection that night. But even though that was the case, we were very aware that it was extremely loud in there. And my colleague who was actually DJing commented that at the point where he was dropping sort of bass lines, he was being lifted up by the sound. It felt like he's been lifted up and moved sideways, vibrating. And there was one point where I put my camera, it's quite a big camera, so I'm using a 70 to 200mm lens, big long lens, heavy Canon camera, and I put it on the stage, and it started tracking across the stage with the vibrations from the subs.
Nah.
And it was, and another point he made, he said, I went to turn the monitors down because he was finding it so loud, and they were already as low as they would go. It was only
no
up.
way. Yeah.
Wow.
So it was quite uncomfortable. I did stay there longer than I mostly should have done, and when I left, I noticed that my hearing had dramatically changed from when I went in, which was obviously a point of concern.
Yeah, you said earlier it was you described people as kind of doing it sounded like people were doing a kind of a Dalek type noise.
Sort of even in the sort of people in the flesh in front of me as we're walking along the sort of north side of the Thames back to the car park. I've noticed that people sounded sort of almost Dalek-y, synthetic or ring modulated, very distorted, very bizarre. And now, as a music producer, that's not a good.
Not at all.
That's not a good thing to be happening.
So it was almost instantly as you left the club, you could tell that it affected immediately.
As soon as I left the club and removed the hearing protection that I was using, I noticed that my hearing was very different.
Yeah. And you told me earlier on there was more or less 5 hours that you were inside.
Yes, it was most probably. I could have left a lot earlier. I thought about leaving a lot earlier, and in hindsight, I should have left a lot earlier.
Yeah, was it kind of pre-canned, those little squishy foam things you can get just in massive bulk?
Unfortunately, they were, it was that type of thing. So I was going for complete blocking out. I didn't want to...
Yeah, of course. Because normally they're pretty good because they do the old expanding thing.
I was going to say, I've been to a couple of places that just have those anyway for people just to be able to...
just the little squishy jobs.
Yeah, and they usually work pretty well. typically, I should say.
They're normally reasonably adequate for my needs.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it seems as though they were completely inadequate for the level of volume in that particular venue on that night. So I thought it was, first I wanted to talk about the effects and how I experienced them, and how I was somewhat surprised and taken aback that the sort of what I associate with hearing loss or hearing damage, and I'll go through some of these things, would be what I would expect, what most people who haven't experienced this type of thing would imagine. So the sort of things that they generally talk about hearing loss is muffled speech and other sounds, difficulty in understanding words, especially against the background noise.
Imagine that's when you start losing the top end, when you get that.
Yeah,
kind of
very
thing.
much so. And the top end is always the first part of your hearing to go anyway. There's a natural decline, and as I'm getting on in years as well, I know that I've got a natural decline in that area. I have had tinnitus for about 10 years, which I developed, ironically, from having the flu rather than actually noise.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I've always been very careful using power tools, any sort of excessive noise. I've always used ear defenders, ear protectors. Always been very conscious. I don't use headphones very often, apart from the studio, and I don't tend to have them too loud. I don't tend to use in-ear with the phone. So I'm generally cautious.
Well, it sounds as careful as any human could possibly
reasonably
be,
careful.
to be honest.
So what I experienced was completely different to what I perceived you would experience from hearing loss. So we've talked about the sort of synthesized, vocoded, kind of robotic,
I guess the Dalek voice.
the Dalek voice, or the ring modulated voice, however you want to describe it. Obviously, pretty unhappy about that situation and quite concerned. Everything I've read says that hearing damage is permanent, and there's very little they can do to mediate those sort of things. There are, of course, hearing aids. Hearing aids are really designed to allow people to access speech and understand speech so they can function within society. They're not there to improve the sound of music per se. In fact, from what I've read, in a lot of cases, hearing aids make music actually sound worse because they're using multi-band filtration and to push the various frequencies that you're deficient in to start making speech more legible and understandable.
Yeah, well, we did have that one dude come into the shop today. Did he say he was a paediatrician or something? But he had some knowledge about the whole hearing loss thing, so he did give you a little bit of hope, I think.
Yeah, there was a bit of possible light at the end of the tunnel.
What was his intake about it?
Well, he stated that I discussed the sort of acoustic shock, which is effectively what it is, with him, and he said, and I have read some of this because my usual stance when I have an issue, especially a health issue or anything like that, I tend to want to understand it, and I read up, and I've read a couple of quite interesting white papers that specifically deal with the kind of symptoms that I was experiencing. So let me double back on things. So I had the ring modulation of the voices, a distinct decrease in the quality in the respect of music, and also very subtle but underlying distortion that seems to work in certain frequency bands, and surprisingly enough not in the high frequency, more closer to the sort of mid-range, which is in reality one of the most alarming features of this issue that I'm going through at the moment. At the end of the day, and I've said to you guys earlier, the problem I have is with most things you can cope, but in respect of music production, music performance, I know now no longer, or currently no longer, trust my ears. And what surprised me is that your ears can produce, through damage, these types of affectations. They're the sort of types of thing that you work in the studio to remove, and so to have them permanently as a feature of your hearing isn't the greatest of solutions. But what it made me think about, which I thought was an interesting topic that we could all sort of discuss, is the philosophical side of what you assume if you assume naively, is that pretty much everybody hears
Differently.
well. Initially, you think everyone hears what you hear. It's a very easy assumption to make, but this has made me think. When you produce a piece of music, how are other people hearing it? Are they hearing it how I hear it, or are they hearing it in some other way?
Yeah, I was saying to you this morning, one of the more interesting things that I've come across is a friend of mine that's a producer and he does a lot of mixing, is half deaf in one of his ears, and he's learnt to compensate in his mixing by doing that. So it's the same. That's where it kind of boils down to things like reference tracks and things like that, being able to listen and understand music from the point of view of, how would you say, from a sonic perspective of what you're listening to and what people are doing, and being able to emulate that. It's a bit like if I start a mix on the NS10s, which is like the typical one, but if I start a mix on the NS10s, they're not the greatest set of speakers in the world, but to get a good sound out of those and then translate it into something else, it's almost the kind of same deal, I think, with him, by kind of getting a mix sounding good with the way that he's got it, and then check it back to another track that he knows is well done, and then to kind of see how that compares.
I understand. My point being is that you need to understand the nature of his hearing loss, because, as I say, my naivety, I understood hearing loss to be a lack of volume, possibly a lack of clarity. I didn't expect these aberrations to come into the distortion. So, as I say, you have these normal type of things that you associate when you read a lot of the paperwork, but what you can actually experience is time and pitch distortion.
How would time distortion kind of manifest itself? I can't really think
one
how
of
that
the
would
things
be.
is if you have you develop a difference between so one ear is hearing sound in two ways. It's either hearing it at a different time, so you get an echo, or it's actually hearing it at a different pitch because it's translating it at a slightly different pitch.
Okay.
So you start hearing things out of tune.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And you start hearing things echoing.
That makes sense. Pretty much like microphones work in a way.
Yes.
So you're delaying.
Your ears are microphones.
Yeah.
Really. That's
Very
what they're doing.
complicated microphones.
Very complicated microphones, but it's what they are, and that's why part of our evolution even is how our ears pick up different sounds at different times, and that's how you have a sense if someone's speaking to you in the right ear or someone speaking to you in the left ear. It's as simple as that. It's just a biological mechanism.
Yeah. It's a big part of my dissertation, actually, doing kind of surround sound stuff, just understanding the psychology of actually how what your brain receives from just two eardrums can actually be decoded. So there's obviously the time difference, the delay, that's interaural time difference. Then you're going to have the difference in filtering on both ears, because all the sound you hear is going to be filtered through the pinnae, the flappy doodles that are that are your ears. Those guys, the filtering caused by those, and then also your brain can track changes in the interaural time difference, so it knows, like, if you move your head while tracks are playing, it can locate sounds quite well by that. So any kind of even small disruptions that could really, really mess things up, just because it's such a finely tuned system.
Yes, exactly. And like many people, I was oblivious to this until you're struck down by this. So it has improved somewhat this week, but I'm still experiencing it.
This also, though, opens me up for another conversation that I'm quite interested to find out about, because, you've said yourself, like, when you find out that you've got an issue like this, you obsess over it. And how much of that, though, do you think is making yourself worry more about, not necessarily worry more about it, but, convincing yourself to a certain degree that, and I'm not saying that you don't have these issues, but convincing yourself that they're much worse than they necessarily are, or even to the degree that it gets you into a mindset that it's not going to go away. Because I think everyone has that one kind of, and be it your hearing or any other health problem, and you get that, and then all of a sudden it's like you start reading the white papers, you start going on like WebMD or something like that, and it's like, oh bugger, I've got cancer.
Well, the thing, the difficulty
You know
is,
what I mean?
change, really. If you use the analogy of studio monitors again, if you get, even if it's a low-end pair of monitors, if you learn them and your room really well, you can adapt to what the affectations of your room are. You can learn how it's going to translate to new systems. And you get a new pair of monitors, you're going to have to do that entire learning process over again. And as Pete has now got a new pair of ears, unfortunately, you're going to have to adapt.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
but that's kind of the point of the saying, is like potentially like a new set of ears. Like you've got the weird stuff like the modulation and etc., and that may well die down. But, you know, if it's a question that there's like a loss of, shall we say, fidelity, then that's maybe something that you can kind of build upon. Or like by knowing, for example, like you say that you're getting distortion in the mid-range, hypothetically, it's almost like a warning sign, or you can treat it as such that, you know, you can either compensate for it or overcompensate for it. That's, okay, right, well, that's starting to not sound right, so by knowing what my ears are like now, I can compensate for that, whether or not it's like, oh, if that mid-range distorting, it's probably too loud. Or if it's over-distorting, it's probably kind of too loud, so I can bring it down, or I might need to scoop it out.
Well, I'd agree with you if it wasn't for the fact that the other, what the ears do in these sort of circumstances when you've damaged certain receptor cells, is that it recruits other cells that aren't actually meant for that purpose into the legion of sensory cells, but those cells overreact. So you start getting certain things that are higher in volume. And there's other factors. There's a factor called obtainment, which is your ability for your ears to actually grab the sound. I haven't experienced this, but there is a situation where literally the sound starts chopping. So whole bits of sound just completely drop out.
Wouldn't it be in an initial process of, you know, if imagine that you go back to mixing and mastering, it's good for you, especially at the beginning of this, you know, such a strange situation, to share your work with other people and to see what their output is, you know, see if they really hear the same sort of stuff that you hear. You know, really collaboration at this stage is really essential.
No, sure, and
think.
it may be a case that I can sort of work and start working in different frequency areas, and maybe the tonality of the stuff I produce will start changing somewhat.
We were saying earlier it's about time for you to just produce a minimal bass-only album.
Yeah, possibly.
Sounds great.
But it's not just that. It's that, and again, I have to sort of be honest that it has improved somewhat, but still, at the crux of it, music doesn't actually sound very nice. So, you know, part of the joy in working with music and producing music is the excitement and the emotional response that the music induces in you. And I would agree with what Andy was saying. I am overanalyzing it, but it's already in our nature as music producers. You spend your time super analysing in the most excruciating detail.
Yeah.
So I spent the whole week listening to everything. I'm just obsessed about every single noise, going, is that the same? Is that different?
Yeah.
Is that a distortion in that person's voice, or is that how they actually sound?
You know, the other interesting part of that as well is how much you take for granted, like without being able to, unless you have that kind of change, you never really think to yourself, has it always been like that? Like, what is it that sounds the same? What does sound the same? Does the track that I listened to a year ago sound the same as it does now, whether or not you go through that event or not? Like, how does that work? Because with all of these things, everyone, you know, if anything starts degrading, it's only when you notice that big crack that it like becomes really apparent. But it's been going like that for like probably a year before it's cracked.
And
right?
I believe that's most probably the case with myself, and it's just that attending this event really pushed it over the cliff. And it's a culmination because there was, as I say, there was in excess of 1,000 people in the audience. The only people I saw were with ear protection with the DJs and myself and a few other people. The staff weren't wearing ear protection. None of the audience was wearing ear protection, and it was loud is an understatement.
So is this something to be aware as well when when you go out, and it's, you know, it's a massive problem. I've noticed to certain clubs sometimes when I go out, which is not very often. you know, it's really excruciating, you know, and I'm a gigging musician, you know, I tend to protect myself, but obviously it's not every day that you carry your occasional earplugs.
It should be. You got to do it.
It should be, yeah.
I've always got mine in my bag.
I know.
Yeah, I was going to say, since hearing Pete, funnily enough, I had taken out my ear protectors and put them on because I'm really guilty of it. Look, see, there's someone else.
Okay, there's 6 of us here. Who put your hands up? Who's got hearing protection on them? That's me. That's 4 out of 6. Tell me what you're doing. You're the only one of us who gigs a lot. Wait, hang on, Guy. Do you gig a lot? Incredibly rarely, apparently.
How often do you go to gigs?
Yeah.
Oh, right, fine.
It's a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call for you guys who don't really, like me, who don't really carry your earplugs to everywhere you go.
Well, if you enjoy music, if you make music in any capacity, if you're going to be anywhere near loud sounds and you want to preserve your enjoyment, go to Boots, get some ACS custom earplugs made. You can get musicians' ones, which try to keep the frequency response very similar. It's like 150 quid. It's worth it. I've had mine for about 6 years now, and they're just amazing. You got to do it. You got to protect your ears.
What sort of decibels have you had yours set at? Because there's several choices you can have. Sort of.
Mine was the basic musician's one, so you get sort of one level that's going to be kind of the very light attenuation for acoustic musicians. It was the one above that. I haven't got a number for it, but it's not even that bad. But even really, really big venues, dance music, I've come out of the thing, taken them out, and then actually my hearing has not changed at all because I have been guilty of going to gigs, not having them with me.
Yeah.
And you know when you've been listening to stuff too loud. But they're totally fine for most gigging applications. Probably not the one that you were at, Pete.
Yeah.
That sounds like it would have just rearranged people's organs.
I had an hearing test yesterday. They did identify hearing loss, but I was aware that my top end was going. I'm not really... Obviously, I'd like it back, but it's never coming back. The overarching thing that I'm really not happy about is the distortion.
Okay. Is there anything that can come back, though? Any of those parameters?
I can't remember who mentioned the doctor that I ran into earlier today. He said he was a paediatrician, but had good knowledge. And what he was telling me kind of jived with some of the white papers I've read. So the fluid that's in your ears has a certain sodium content, there's a certain chemical content, and that can get disrupted and it can get distorted. And he said that he felt that things might improve within sort of 4 to 6 weeks, which was a bit of a ray of light, because other than that, I'm thinking, do I sell all the synths?
You send that message kind of to the chat. It's like, no, Pete, you can't do it. You just got to be patient with them and just learn to.
It'll only make Kieran happy. Come on.
Yeah.
No. Well, we'll see.
And that's the last
I'm trying to be as
want.
pragmatic as possible. But I mean, the overarching message I wanted to sort of bring to everyone here and everyone out there is, don't take your hearing for granted.
Yeah.
Especially if you work in the music business.
Yeah.
You've really got to treasure it. It's one of your most precious assets that you've got, and you really must go to the most extent you need to do to look after it.
Absolutely.
Does your ear feel heavy, or do you feel like any physical pain?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Physical pain.
Yeah, I mean, just about your ear though, not just in general.
Yeah, I just hurt.
Suddenly we turn into some sort of like a doctor's appointment.
And how would you say that affected your relationship with the rest of the family? Just lying back on the couch, talking about your ears.
Yeah, so
it's like we got the living room back.
protect your ears, guys. Protect your ears.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's it.
So I lost my hearing in one ear in 2016 because of a health issue. So it was like at the height of my health problems. And the thing is, I didn't even realize it because I was able to have conversations. I felt my ear was a bit heavy, felt like it was blocked. I thought it was just like pressure. But what ended up happening was that I handed in my final project for university, and I studied sound, so I was working on this film, and it was a lot of white noise, a lot of different frequencies, a lot of whistles and like low end and stuff. And what ended up happening is that I could hear the low end and the mids just fine, but I couldn't hear the high frequencies, so I just kept pulling it up until I could hear it.
Oh, so everybody who listened to it was just in pain.
Yeah, everybody that was listening
But
to
you
it
weren't.
couldn't hear anything except like this like whistle. And I had no idea, and like my tutor was like, "Oh, this is really good," except like half of it, the whistle was just like you couldn't hear anything but a whistle. I was like, "What whistle? What are you on about?" And then after my hearing cleared up, like a few months later, and I started to get better, I revisited it and I listened to it, and I was like, "What? What is that?"
There was one point actually when we were in the middle of our discussions about the hearing loss when Pete, you said, I think you sounded kind of vocodery, the kind of weird distortions you're getting. That does actually work as a tasty little segue onto our extra topic. And we've got
Bonus
Moog.
round.
Oh, wait, I mean, excuse me, Dr. Robert Moog. They've reissued a vocoder. I've seen the pictures. I don't really understand it, but we do have the notes here. Lots of pretty pictures. So when was this guy first around in the wild, Pete?
First produced in 1978.
I've just seen the price. Oh, God. Okay, keep going.
So it's a 16-channel vocoder. It's very much a patching device where, depending on how you want to configure it, you actually use quarter-inch patch leads.
Oh, God.
Oh, is it what?
Oh, God.
Oh boy.
I've just seen the price.
Oh Jesus.
So it's sort of fixed filter bank type style,
Yes, exactly.
I guess. Rack mountable. It comes in its own little case kind of dude. What are we looking at? 4U on that one, probably. Oh, man. And yeah.
It's a complete reissue. They've just gone.
Yeah.
16-time filter band CV.
The number we've got. Prepare yourself. The big 5,000. Oh,
5,000
Wow.
bones.
5,000 pounds.
What
And the price
heck?
is right, everyone.
I'm not sure quite who this is for.
yeah, it was interesting when Behringer. Oh no, we brought the B word in. I thought we'd make it. Anyway, they did the VC340, their clone, and like, it's a vocoder. We didn't sell many. Like, no. Does anybody actually care about vintage vocoding
I don't
sounds?
know. It seems like at that kind of price, it would be like the kind of rich guy would do it. It's like,
That's just all Moog modular, Andy.
I bought it. I felt something for a second, and it's gone.
Oh man! We also have the weight. It's 23 pounds.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, that's a bargain. Oh wait,
Yeah.
that's American money for weight there. I mean, it does have a certain vibe just in the looks.
chuck that
It's
bad boy
pretty
over here,
cool.
let's have a
Andy,
look.
feast your eyes on this one. Yeah, so they did. They really recently re-released one of the smaller Moog modular units. It was like 10 grand or something, 20
Was
grand.
it a
I don't
System
know.
10, System 15? I can't remember.
Something like that. But there's other companies, lots of pedal companies that are going to be making hand-wired amplifiers, handmade pedals. Moog stuff is all handmade, even the production stuff.
Yep.
Why on earth is the modular and this vocoder, why on earth are they so expensive? I really don't understand it, because they're not going to be sourcing massively hard-to-find vintage components. It's just going to be nice resistors and capacitors and all that kind of crap. What do you know about that, Pete? Because I'm not great with the electronics.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's going to be modern components. I mean, I still think it's going to be through-hole. They're using the same designs.
Why
I mean,
so
it
much
literally
money?
is a re-release. It's not an updated version. It's a re-release from
I tell you,
42 years ago.
I actually have the answer to that
Oh, yeah.
question. It's because they can,
Yeah.
Oh, there
and
we
it's
go.
because people will, and it's as simple as that.
And it's funny because you wouldn't associate a vocoder with Moog straight away. It's not like
Most
it's their
people
holy
would go
grail.
Roland first, wouldn't
Yeah,
they?
Yeah.
they would.
Yeah, but it's because they can, and it's because people will, in my humble opinion.
Will they, though?
That's why it's like 5,000 bones.
All I know is we're not stocking it. So there we go.
5,000 shillings.
Yeah, I mean, wonder if we were actually getting any order. I mean, is it even on our database?
No, it's not. Nah, never. The modular stuff was once, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, when one of our friends who works for the UK distributor for Moog, when he was here, I think at one point we had some Moog modular. 3 or 4. This is Tom. Works for Source. I think that those were here. But no, we're not going to do that.
I'm sure you could get something substantially cheaper that's going to do. I think it's just for the ultra enthusiast.
Yeah, it's the ultra vintage nerd who may want
It's
it.
just I've got one of these.
Yeah,
The rich nerd.
Wow,
Yeah.
why on earth do you have that? So you can be ridiculed.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few videos.
And I know what the answer to that question would be. Why on earth did you do it? And it would be because they did.
Again,
And
because
I
they can. Just so they can show off their money. Right, we're kind of coming to the end today, but I reckon we go for a quick whiz round. Who's done anything exciting this week? We've gone through Pete's week, which is It's not exciting, is it?
No.
It's just
no,
it's
not exciting. It's just very depressing.
oh no, poor Pete.
Super quick
Andy,
one.
what do you got?
I watched Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler in it. It's on Netflix, and I swear to God, I had a heart palpitation every 5 minutes watching it. It's the most stressful film. Adam Sandler is a jewelry dealer in New York, but like not working at like H.M. Samuel, like in like this big jewelry thing, and he's basically in a load of debt with a lot of people, and he gets this gem and he's got to like kind of sell it and that kind of thing. I'm really not selling it, but it's super good. The reason I'm trying not to sell it is because I really encourage you to watch it, and there are like twists and turns.
You just don't want any spoilers.
Yeah, there are twists and turns, but it's super good and it's super stressful. Like within 15 minutes, I was like thinking, this can't get much worse, and then I looked and there was still like an hour and a half to go or something like that, and it was just like, oh my God. And by the end of it, I just literally had my like hands in my head.
So it was
like
a stressful watching experience. Not
oh, dude, it sucked. Like in the best possible way. Like
I don't understand that at all. I'll have to watch it then.
You should
just to
watch
experience
it. Like, it is an experience. That's the thing. And Adam Sandler was really good in it.
Yeah,
like
nice
really, really good. So
and that's
that was,
Netflix.
like, the thing. That's on Netflix.
Sick. Telma, you got anything?
So apart from watching the Avengers: The Endgame, finally.
I haven't seen it.
I know.
I might do 1 year.
Do it.
Yeah.
I think it's really nice. It's great. It's a great ending to the whole, to the whole thing.
£600 billion on it. It was really nice. It was really good.
Oh yes. No, I did had some fun. It was 3 hours though, quite long. So if you guys are willing to stick around for 3 hours, make sure you get plenty of popcorn.
To be fair, that you probably get, since it's that long, you're getting a little bit more for your money, in terms of the cinema experience, given that tickets are pretty pricey these days.
I know.
That's actually fairly. I didn't think about
It's a
that.
bargain.
But this is just to follow.
Unless you buy popcorn and then you're out of it.
Yeah,
sweet
but
and salted.
You know you want to go with a
Yeah.
hot dog though, right?
I've never had hot food at a cinema. That
Really?
just seems really
You're
weird.
missing out.
Actually, if you've
Doesn't
never
match.
been
Super good.
go to a cinema in America, it's amazing because you can just order like table service food. Just it's
outrageous.
really strange. You can
That's
just order
great.
a pizza
I thought it was
mid-film.
weird when they brought in
Can
the
I get
Lazy
cold
Boys.
pizza?
I don't know. Weird.
Yeah, that is the true cinema experience.
Cold pizza.
And if I can't be sat there in my boxers and socks, then just really what's the point?
It's the home experience, man.
Yeah.
Well, apart from that, I have done some research at university, and we've plugged in some really interesting controllers. So we've grabbed a few joysticks, like gaming joysticks, and some Guitar Hero kind of jam guitar controllers as well, and we've turned them into MIDI controllers, so they actually became real instruments. So that was quite an interesting high point of my week as well. How about you, Ben?
Absolutely nothing interesting whatsoever has happened to me.
And that's the
And
perfect
on that
ending.
note, it's time to go.
There it is. We do well. There is a little bit coming up. So tomorrow I'll be popping over to Burghfield Recording Studios with Andrew. We're setting up for a session which Pete will be videoing as well. We're going to have some delicious Fender Rhodes from our friend Nick going into the modular. There's going to be granular stuff. There's going to be the Strymon Magneto. And it's going to be the most relaxing thing ever. There'll be audio and video evidence at some later date that we will possibly mention in future episodes when we have any idea.
Where can you
that'll
find that
happen.
music? Where can you find that?
don't know.
No.
No idea.
We're waiting on it, man.
Oh, we're waiting
Sit
on
tight,
it. There's
sit
nothing
tight.
released yet.
We don't know when or where it's going to be. Stay tuned. Thank you very much for listening to RackAddicts After Hours. We'll see you
Beautiful.
next time.
Bye.